Melody here. You might know me as ApplePie Movement. I'm a humanitarian sharing the conversations with humanity which need to be heard. In today's conversation with Rev Rhina, we discuss how she went from being a lawyer to advocating for immigrant rights and founding the first church for immigrants in San Francisco. So come on, grab a piece of pie and join our conversation.
I read in your bio that you had a law degree and you were involved with employment law and so forth, and that came from being raised in the midst of a civil war and witnessing people standing up and fighting for human rights. What was that like, being raised in a civil war?
Well, I now look back to those times and I feel very fortunate because I learned a lot from growing up in times when people fight for ideals with all their might and all they have. And so I come from a country where people stood up against repression, injustice. I had a father who was fighting with the leftists, so I learned a lot from him, telling me why he was fighting for. I also learned a lot from the Catholics. The Catholic Church was very active in those times and side with the poor. And Monsignor Oscar Romero, who's now a saint, thanks to Pope Francis, was somebody who will stood up in the pulpit and demand justice and every chance he had, and then he got assassinated, similar to Martin Luther King. And so there were so many messages that has formed not just me, like a generation. I have friends and we always talk about it. Every time I go to El Salvador, we talk about those times. And they were very formative. And lucky, I was one of the people who was able to live in 1983. I didn't stay there for the extension of the war. I witnessed enough to know that war is wrong, but also when people get tired of being mistreated, they can rise up and fight.
So you were involved with employment law. Why did you decide to use your law degree to fight for equality opposed to becoming a capitalist and earning a lot of money?
My wife would say that was, she's like, why didn't you become
right?
A for-profit lawyer? What were you doing? Actually, it was very random, but my first employer, I was in my second year of law school in Long Island at Hofstra University. And my first employer came to talk as to the worker center. She had just founded this workplace project, it was called. And she talked about the exploitation of the workers that were coming to her with restaurant workers, domestic employees, a lot of workers in the service industry who were being paid less than minimum wage, not overtime. And she finished her presentation and I said, how do I sign up? I want to be a volunteer at your center. And that volunteer became an internship, became a job. And that's how I ended up doing the work of labor rights. And now it was clear to me, being an immigrant too, that I was going to do something public interest law. That was clear in my mind. I just didn't know what yet. I thought I was going to be an immigration attorney because I was an immigrant. But Jennifer Gordon, my first boss, after she finished that presentation, I just got hooked by what she was doing and I became part of her team.
And that background, are you applying any of that now to your interfaith work that you're doing, and that with working with immigrants? Are you supporting any legislation or any bills?
No, not really. I am retired from practice of the law. That way I don't have to pay my fees in New York. I can retire of the practice of the law. No, I don't. I'm not still practicing law anymore, but it's a really great skill and analytic way of thinking. It's been a good training for me because I read something and I can also think, oh my God, this can be a lawsuit. This can, so I appreciate I had that education. And also it is for me, a Latina, a lesbian, an immigrant, somebody with a heavy accent. For me, having that accreditation is a key that opens doors, because if I didn't have it, I don't think I was going to be taken that seriously. So I'm glad it's good. I'm glad that I have it.
What steps can we take culturally to wake up our country, to wake up the population as to creating an inclusive country and an inclusive future for ourselves?
People have to travel more outside the U.S. I feel that when people don't travel outside the U.S., they think the U.S. is all that is. And there's a world out there that doesn't look like this. Like, it doesn't look like this. People have to watch all movies that aren't just Hollywood. People, like any medium, any tool that can create a larger worldview in somebody's mind can be so eye-opening. But people are so afraid of, going outside their little safety. Yeah. So.
Right. So for people who are afraid of going outside of their safe little world, how do we wake them up? How do we reach them?
Oh my God. We pray for them hard. It's so hard when somebody wants to be entrenched there to say, wake up, smell the coffee. But, people did it for me. People will give me a book to read, and I will read it, and it will open my eyes to something new that I didn't know, that the church wasn't telling me. So, little incentives like that can always help.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another ApplePie TableTalk. And thank you, Reverend Rhina, for joining us. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
And just